Imagine standing outside a bedchamber in the heart of Ferrara on a cold February night in 1502. Inside those walls, beneath flickering lamplight and under circumstances that would be documented and reported back to Rome, a young woman just 21 years old was about to seal an alliance that would reshape the balance of power across the entire Italian peninsula. Her name was Lucrezia Borgia, daughter of Pope Alexander VI, and this was her wedding night to Alfonso d'Este, heir to the Duchy of Ferrara. But this was no ordinary consummation. Before the sun rose the next morning, reports would travel back to Rome confirming that the marriage had been fulfilled not once, not twice, but several times in a single night, with witnesses present to verify every intimate detail. The Pope himself would receive these reports with satisfaction, for this marriage was never about love or companionship. It was about forging an unbreakable political chain that would bind the Papal States to one of Italy's most powerful dynasties. And Lucrezia, whether willing participant or dutiful daughter, was the living link that made it all possible. To understand why this night mattered so profoundly, we must first grasp who the Borgias were and what they represented in Renaissance Italy. The Borgia family, originally from Spain, where they were known as the Borgias, had clawed their way to the pinnacle of European power through a potent combination of strategic brilliance, ruthless ambition, and shameless nepotism. When Cardinal Rodrigo Borgia ascended to the papal throne in 1492 as Pope Alexander VI, he brought with him a vision that shocked even the cynical power brokers of Renaissance Rome. Unlike previous popes who might quietly favor their relatives, Alexander made no pretense of restraint. He openly flaunted his mistresses, publicly acknowledged his illegitimate children, and wielded the immense wealth and authority of the papacy as a family business designed to enrich and empower his offspring. His children became his weapons of conquest. His eldest son, Giovanni, commanded the papal armies. His second son, Cesare, perhaps the most brilliant and dangerous of all the Borgias, resigned his position as cardinal to become a military commander, carving out territories across central Italy with a combination of tactical genius and breathtaking brutality. And then there was Lucrezia, born in 1480 to Rodrigo and his longtime mistress, Vanozza de Catane. Beautiful, educated, fluent in multiple languages including Latin, Italian, French, and Greek, Lucrezia possessed all the refinement expected of a Renaissance noblewoman. But in her father's eyes, her greatest asset was not her intellect or charm. It was her marriageability, her capacity to be wed and re-wed to whichever family could advance Borgia interests at any given moment. By the time she reached her early 20s, Lucrezia had already endured 2 marriages that ended in spectacular failure and scandal. Her first union, arranged when she was barely 13, married her to Giovanni Sforza, Lord of Pesaro, cementing an alliance between the Borgias and the powerful Sforza family of Milan. The marriage was celebrated in the Vatican on June 12, 1493. For 4 years, the marriage served its purpose. But when political winds shifted, and the Borgias no longer needed Milanese support, Pope Alexander simply decided the marriage should end. The annulment proceedings became a humiliating spectacle. Giovanni was forced to sign documents declaring himself impotent, admitting before witnesses that the marriage had never been consummated, despite having been married for years. Historical sources note he had been married previously to Maddalena Gonzaga, who died in childbirth in 1490, which made the impotence claim particularly humiliating. Enraged by this public emasculation, Giovanni struck back with vicious rumors, claiming that Pope Alexander wanted his daughter back in Rome for incestuous purposes, spreading tales of depravity within the Borgia household that would haunt Lucrezia's reputation for centuries. Her second marriage seemed to promise something different. In July 1498, she wed Alfonso of Aragon, Duke of Bisceglie, the illegitimate son of the King of Naples. Contemporary accounts suggest something remarkable happened. The young couple actually fell in love. They had a son together named Rodrigo, born on November 1, 1499, and for a brief window, Lucrezia experienced what marriage could be when affection, rather than cold calculation, bound 2 people together. But political realities would not permit such happiness to endure. When Cesare Borgia forged a new alliance with France, Naples became an obstacle rather than an asset. On July 15, 1500, assassins attacked Alfonso on the steps of St. Peter's Basilica, stabbing him multiple times. He survived the initial assault, and Lucrezia desperately nursed him back to health within the Vatican itself. But it was futile. On August 18th, while he lay recovering, strangers entered his chamber and strangled him to death. Most historians believe Cesare ordered the murder, eliminating his sister's husband with the same cold efficiency he brought to eliminating any obstacle to Borgia power. Lucrezia was 20 years old, widowed for the second time, and traumatized by violence that occurred within the supposed sanctuary of the papal residence itself. But her father and brother had no time for grief. They needed another alliance, another strategic marriage, and this time they aimed higher than ever before. Their target was the House of Este, one of Italy's oldest and most prestigious families, rulers of Ferrara, Modena, and Reggio. An alliance with the Este family would give the Borgias a foothold in northern Italy, opening a corridor to Tuscany and beyond, while providing the Este with papal protection and favor. It was a marriage that could redraw the political map of Renaissance Italy. Yet negotiating this union proved extraordinarily difficult. Duke Ercole d'Este, the aging ruler of Ferrara, wanted nothing to do with the scandal-tainted Borgia family. He maneuvered desperately to avoid the match, hoping instead to secure a French princess for his son Alfonso. But Pope Alexander proved relentless. He dispatched envoys to Ferrara bearing not requests, but thinly veiled threats. He reminded Duke Ercole that papal armies could just as easily march against Ferrara as protect it. He dangled financial incentives, territorial concessions, and religious appointments for Ercole's relatives. When the French king himself sent word supporting the Borgia proposal, Duke Ercole finally recognized he had no escape. The marriage contract was signed in August of 1501. The dowry was set at 100,000 ducats, an astronomical sum, along with territorial grants that brought significant lands under Este control. Duke Ercole had extracted every possible concession, but in the end he surrendered his son to a Borgia bride. The political implications rippled across Italy like shockwaves. This marriage represented more than two families joining forces. It signaled that the Borgias, despite their reputation for scandal and violence, had achieved acceptance among Italy's most ancient nobility. It meant that territories stretching from Rome through the Romagna to the Po Valley would now fall under coordinated Borgia-Este influence. It threatened the traditional balance of power that had prevented any single family from dominating the Italian peninsula. Venice watched with alarm. Florence calculated new diplomatic strategies. Spanish and French ambassadors sent urgent dispatches home. Everyone understood that if this marriage succeeded, if it produced heirs and lasted beyond the inevitable death of the aging Pope Alexander, it could fundamentally alter who controlled Italy for generations. On January 6, 1502, Lucrezia departed Rome in a procession that resembled a military campaign more than a bridal journey. 150 mules carried her dowry and belongings. 1,000 people accompanied her, including her brother Cesare for part of the journey. She wore robes of gold and crimson, and at every city along the route, local nobles staged elaborate welcomes, recognizing that this woman represented power on an unprecedented scale. The journey through winter weather took weeks, winding through the Apennine Mountains. On January 31st, as her party approached Ferrara, her future husband Alfonso surprised everyone by riding out to meet her at Bentivoglio. He spent hours in conversation with her, and contemporary accounts suggest he was charmed, perhaps relieved to discover that his notorious bride possessed grace and intelligence rather than the demonic qualities rumor attributed to her. But charm and intelligence would not be enough to satisfy the political requirements of this union. When Lucrezia finally entered Ferrara on February 2nd, the city erupted in celebration. Crowds lined the streets as she rode through in a magnificent procession, dressed in black velvet with a cape of gold brocade trimmed with ermine, her hair caught in a net of gold and diamonds, rubies and pearls gleaming at her throat. The wedding ceremony itself was splendid, conducted with all the pageantry befitting the union of two great houses. But everyone present understood that the true ceremony would occur later, in private, or rather in the supervised privacy that powerful families demanded when dynastic succession hung in the balance. Renaissance Italian marriage customs, particularly among the nobility, treated the consummation of marriage as a legal requirement that often demanded verification. Unlike modern Western culture, where the wedding night is considered intensely private, Renaissance aristocrats sometimes viewed consummation as a contractual obligation. The presence of representatives from both families, and in important political marriages like this one, representatives from external interested parties such as the papacy, served to ensure that the union could not later be challenged on grounds of non-consummation. While the degree of supervision varied, such oversight reflected the era's understanding of marriage as primarily a political and dynastic transaction, rather than a purely personal union. For Lucrezia and Alfonso, that February night carried the weight of two dynasties. After the public celebrations concluded, after the final toast were raised and the last guest departed, the couple retired to consummate their union. Historical records indicate that papal envoys were stationed to receive confirmation of the marriage's completion. What happened in those hours became the subject of detailed reports dispatched to Rome. The most significant came from the papal representatives, who sent word back to Pope Alexander that his daughter and her new husband had fulfilled their marital duties with what the sources describe as impressive vigor. The message that reached the Pope reported that the couple had consummated their marriage multiple times during that first night. Pope Alexander received these reports with undisguised satisfaction. This represented confirmation that the most important political alliance of his papacy had been properly sealed. In Renaissance political thinking, thorough consummation made a marriage more difficult to annul. Each intimate act created another layer of legal and social binding between the two families. Given that political marriages could be dissolved on grounds of non-consummation, as Lucrezia's first marriage had been, documented consummations provided assurance that this alliance would be difficult to challenge. The reports also noted that Alfonso, despite his initial reluctance to marry a Borgia, had fulfilled his duties with considerable enthusiasm. Historical sources suggest he maintained a balance during those early days, alternating between his new marital responsibilities and his customary pursuits. The frankness of these contemporary accounts, shocking to modern sensibilities, reflected Renaissance attitudes toward marriage among the powerful. These unions were understood as political and dynastic transactions first, with personal compatibility being a pleasant bonus if it happened to occur. The verification of their physical consummation was treated with the same matter-of-fact attention as the verification of dowry payments or territorial transfers. But what did this night mean for Italy? In the immediate term, it achieved exactly what both families hoped. The Borgias gained a powerful northern ally whose military strength and political connections could support Cesare's ongoing campaigns in the Romagna. The Este family gained papal protection against their enemies and rivals, along with financial benefits and territorial concessions that strengthened their duchy. For the broader Italian political landscape, however, the marriage represented something more ominous. It demonstrated that the Borgias, despite their Spanish origins and scandalous reputation, could now intermarry with Italy's most ancient houses. It showed that Pope Alexander's strategy of using his children as diplomatic tools had succeeded beyond what anyone thought possible. The alliance shaped Italian politics for years. When Pope Alexander died in 1503, barely a year and a half after his daughter's marriage, the Borgia power structure might have collapsed entirely. Indeed, Cesare's military territories did fall apart, and the family's enemies moved quickly to reclaim lands the Borgias had seized. But Lucrezia's position in Ferrara remained secure. She was now Duchess of Ferrara, and when her father-in-law, Duke Ercole, died in 1505, she became the reigning duchess alongside her husband. The scandal and violence of her Borgia years gradually faded as she established herself as a patron of arts and learning, hosting some of the greatest minds of the Italian Renaissance at her court in Ferrara. Her transformation was remarkable. The young woman who had been married 3 times by age 22, who had seen 2 husbands discarded or murdered for political expediency, who had endured rumors of incest and scandal, evolved into one of the most respected women in Renaissance Italy. Poets praised her virtue and wisdom. The great writer Ludovico Ariosto honored her in his epic poem Orlando Furioso, declaring that she deserved a place in the Temple of Honor for her beauty and honesty. She bore 8 children with Alfonso, though historians note she endured as many as 10 pregnancies when including miscarriages and stillbirths, reflecting the harsh realities of Renaissance childbearing. Like many Renaissance mothers, she lost several children to the high infant mortality of the era. In 1512, Lucrezia withdrew from public life, possibly in response to learning that Rodrigo, her son by Alfonso of Aragon, had died. She began spending more time in her apartments or in nearby convents, turning increasingly to religion. When she died on June 24, 1519, at age 39, dying 10 days after giving birth to a stillborn daughter, her husband Alfonso grieved genuinely. He wrote that he could not pen the news without tears, describing her as his sweet and dear companion, praising the tender love that had existed between them. The witnessed consummation of February 2, 1502, which appeared so calculated and political in nature, had somehow evolved into a marriage marked by genuine affection and partnership over their 17 years together. Perhaps that represents the strangest twist in Lucrezia's story. The union that began as pure political transaction, verified and documented like a business contract, became something more human over 17 years together. Alfonso, initially resistant to marrying a Borgia, grew to love and respect his controversial wife. Lucrezia, trapped for so long in her family's schemes, finally found a space where she could exercise real authority and create genuine relationships. Her story forces us to confront uncomfortable realities about power, family, and marriage in Renaissance Italy. We want to view Lucrezia as either innocent victim or willing accomplice to Borgia crimes. But the truth sits in more complicated territory. She was a woman born into an extraordinarily powerful and ruthless family, used repeatedly as a tool of their ambitions, yet possessing enough intelligence and adaptability to eventually transcend that role and build something meaningful in Ferrara. That wedding night, with its multiple consummations dutifully reported to Rome, was degrading by any modern standard. Yet it was also the moment when she finally escaped the direct control of her father and brother, gaining access to a court where she could finally develop her own identity. The legacy of that night extends beyond one woman's story. It illustrates how Renaissance Italian politics functioned at the highest levels, where marriage was warfare by other means, where women's bodies became territorial boundaries, and where the most intimate human acts carried geopolitical significance. The witnesses present that night were not there out of perversion, but out of political necessity, recording evidence that might be demanded in future legal or diplomatic disputes. The multiple consummations reported back to the Pope were not scandalous, but strategic, each one making the bond harder to break. Modern historians continue debating Lucrezia's true character. Contemporary sources contradict each other wildly, with enemies painting her as a poisoner and seductress, while those who knew her in Ferrara described a pious, intelligent, and generous duchess. What seems undeniable is that she survived extraordinary circumstances, adapted to impossible situations, and ultimately built a life of substance despite a start that would have destroyed most people. That February night in 1502 was both her most objectified moment and paradoxically the beginning of her liberation. If you found this glimpse into Renaissance politics and the extraordinary life of Lucrezia Borgia fascinating, hit that like button and subscribe to the Codex of History for more stories that reveal the complex, often shocking realities behind historical events we thought we knew. Share this video with anyone interested in Renaissance Italy, the Borgia family, or the hidden mechanisms of power that shaped European history. History is never as simple as the legends suggest, and the truth is almost always stranger and more compelling than fiction.